Partnership Sales and Distributions Problem 2. So we have ABC, a cash method partnership with 3 equal partners. And we're going to assume these partners are individuals just to make it simpler. So we have A, B, and C, again, all equal partners, so 1/3 owners. The partnership has no liabilities. So the partnership, very plain vanilla, just has some basic assets: cash, inventory, accounts receivable, and land held for investment. So in the hands of the partnership, that land will be considered a capital asset. Assuming the bases of A, B, and C respectively are 40, 30, 20 in their outside partnership interests. So we need to go through this problem, and each partner, A, B, and C, and there's going to be 4 situations. Situation A, B, C, and D. And in each situation, A, B, and C are going to receive a distribution from the partnership. So specifically, we're told that in this problem, in A, and I'll remind you as we go through each. In A, situation A, the partnership makes a cash distribution of $20 to each partner and also distributes an undivided 1/3 interest in the land to each partner. In situation B, the partnership is going to make a distribution to each partner consisting of $10 in cash, 1/3 of the inventory, and an undivided 1/3 interest in land. In situation C, the partnership makes a distribution to each partner consisting of $10 in cash, 1/3 of the accounts receivable, and 1/3 of the inventory. And finally, situation D, the partnership distributes $45 cash to A and distributes a 1/2 undivided interest in both B and C. Okay, so considering those facts, let's go back to our fact pattern. Again, we have these assets: cash, inventory, accounts receivable, and land held for investment. So in all 4 situations, all assets are going to be involved some way, somehow, in looking at all 4 different situations. So remember, when it comes to distributions, a distribution is when a partner is dealing with the partnership, either giving up partnership interest or receiving property. When it comes to distributions, there's 2 types of distributions. There's simple distributions and there's complex distributions. Complex distributions are when a partner, his or her share of partnership, what we call Section 751B hot assets, are unproportional to when they were before. So here in this specific situation, in situation A, B, C, and D, there are no disproportionate or complex distributions. They're all simple distributions. So we know it's going to be a simple distribution. And again, the reason why is because there's not going to be any situation where partner A, B, or C, they have an unproportional interest with respect to the hot assets. The hot assets here for this problem are going to be the inventory, which is substantially appreciated, and accounts receivable. Now, whenever there is a simple distribution, there's 2 types of simple distributions. There's liquidating and there's non-liquidating. Now, we have some general rules that apply across the board of liquidating and non-liquidating distributions, but there are some differences. And the main reason is that in a liquidating distribution, there's no basis or no interest left over. So we don't have to allocate anything to the basis. Versus in a non-liquidating, which we also call a current or we also call operating distributions, there is a basis in the partnership interest that the partner has. And again, the way you know whether it's liquidating or non-liquidating is the problem will say the partner in a complete liquidation, the partnership's interest is gone. And that did not happen in this case because nowhere in our problem does it say that. Now, as I mentioned, there are some general rules that apply to both liquidating and non-liquidating distributions, but there are some differences. So I talked about these rules when we talked about the basic partnership tax law, specifically under the distributions and retirement of partner. And this slide is very important. What we're going to do is we're going to create a chart. And I'm going to show you the chart in a moment. Whenever you have a distribution problem for a partnership, and it's a simple distribution, not complex, you have to create this chart, and it always works out. It helps tremendously. There's a few things that we focus on, but we go in an order. Now, there's 2 real focuses that we do in this chart. The first thing is we determine, is there any gain or loss to any partner in the problem? Because the partnership is never going to have a gain or loss in a simple distribution to a partner. Maybe a complex, but again, we're not dealing with that. So that's the first issue that we always address using this chart. The second issue, in a distribution, each partner or certain partners, they're getting property. What is the adjusted basis that a partner takes in the respective property? So remember we saw that in situation A, B, C, and D, the partners, right, partners A, B, and C are going to get different assets. Well, we need to know, hey, going forward, what basis does the partner take? Because if the partner takes it and starts depreciating or sells it in the future, we need to know, hey, what basis does A, B, and C get in the 1/3 interest in the land, for example, in situation A? Because going forward, that's going to make a big difference, okay? And the way we do this is we always start with the outside basis right before we take into account the distribution of that respective partner. And then what we do is we go down and we look at each tier. There's 3 tiers. Now, tier 1, there's cash. If there's any cash distribution, any cash that's being distributed, we take that out, and that cash obviously gets the basis. It's a very fundamental principle in the tax law that cash always has the face value as its basis. Can't have differences. Now, if the basis, the outside basis starting, is not enough to cover the cash, then the partner is going to have capital gain. This is the only time in a simple distribution when a partner can have gain. So again, remember, partnership in a simple distributions that we're talking about, partnership, never going to have gain or loss. So no gain or loss to the partnership. That's different and complex. For a partner, you can have capital gain if, again, under tier 1, there's not enough basis to cover the cash. You can also have a capital loss in tier 3, and I'll mention that in a moment. Those are the only times you can have gain and loss. So we give the cash the basis. If there's not enough basis, we create gain, and then we're going to adjust the basis. And what we do is we bring that basis down, and we keep reducing it through these assets. Then we go to tier 2. We have tier 2 ordinary income assets. These are any assets that if the partnership was to sell them would create ordinary income or ordinary loss. Now, notice I didn't say hot assets, because hot assets, well, some hot assets will be ordinary income assets. Some assets that are not hot, for example, if it's in inventory, but it's not substantially appreciated, it's not considered a hot asset for distribution purposes, but it's considered a tier 2. So you got to pay close attention. So we're looking at any assets to the partnership that would result in ordinary character, income or loss to the partnership. And those will go to tier 2 and they will reduce the basis. Now the rule is, it's a lesser of rule. Okay? It's the lesser of the inside basis. So remember in the partnership basics video, we talked about the concept of inside basis versus outside basis. Inside basis is what the partnership has in the asset. Outside basis is what the partner has in his or her interest or its interest. Now this is after tier 1, after we calculate the subtotal, the remaining outside basis after tier 1. That's why we create this chart. We go in order. Now, inside basis also has to be the percentage to the partner. So if the partner is receiving a percentage of an asset, like 1/3 of inventory or 1/3 of accounts receivable, you take a percentage of that and you use that rule. So again, it's the lesser of. So it's the lesser of the inside basis. So we look at the partnership. We have to focus on the percentage to the partner, or the outside basis to the partner after tier 1. And we reduce the outside basis and we continue down to tier 3. Now, when we get to tier 3, things start getting a little interesting. We've got tier 3 is whatever assets you have remaining. So these are going to be capital assets, section 1231, things that are not cash or ordinary income, ordinary loss assets. So this is interesting because if it's non-liquidating, meaning that we have a basis left, we get to allocate to the basis, the adjusted basis of the partnership interest. We still have that, right? If it's considered non-liquidating. That's key. That means that you still have a partnership basis left. Because remember, liquidating versus non-liquidating. Liquidating means, hey, you don't have a partnership interest. So there's no basis to allocate to. So non-liquidating, you're going to be allocating to the partnership basis. But if it's liquidating, we don't get here. So that is key. That is something extremely important to understand. If you understand that, that's a very big element of the themes of distributions. So if it's non-liquidating, we use the same rule as tier 2. It's the lesser of rule, right? The lesser of the inside basis to the partnership, taking into account the percentage, or the outside basis after tier 2. If it's liquidating, though, then guess what? Whatever basis you have left in after tier 2 gets allocated to that asset or among or between the assets. And we're going to see another example in problem 3 where we have a liquidating distribution and we actually see how this works out. Now, if you don't have any tier 3 assets and it's liquidating, then what you do is you give the partner a capital loss for the remaining outside basis because the rules will not let you allocate to a tier 2 asset, ordinary income or ordinary loss asset, because that would be too good to be true, because then you would be able to increase the basis in that tier 2 ordinary asset, then later sell it and take an ordinary loss, and we all know the benefit of ordinary losses over capital losses or other types of losses. So that's a huge item. Now again, if this is a non-liquidating, whatever's left gets allocated to the partnership interest. So now let's go and take a look at our specific problem and go through this. And if you follow this chart, it really makes it easy, like riding a bicycle. It really makes it. So the chart is critical in understanding these rules. If you understand these rules, again, how it applies overall to simple distributions with a few little carve-outs for liquidating versus non-liquidating, it's not that bad. Without this chart, though, it's a lot less manageable. So let's go ahead and go through it and use our chart. All right, this is going to be interesting. We're going to use this chart now. And what you're going to see is that it actually works out kind of interesting. All right. So we have, again, this partnership. We have situations A, B, C, and D. I read to you earlier, and I'm going to zoom in just to remind us what each situation is. And if you want to stop the video and take this down, these notes, right, this is what exactly is happening. In A, we're going to get $20 cash to each partner, and then a 1/3 interest in the land. In B, $10 cash, 1/3 of inventory, 1/3 land. C, $10 cash, 1/3 of accounts receivable, 1/3 of inventory. And finally, D, A gets 45. B and C get 1/2 of the land. So I'm actually going to write that above each of those so we remember, so I don't have to keep going back. But if you wanted to, you could go back to that part of the video and, rewind and take note of that. So in A, right, there's two things. Each partner gets 20 cash and 1/3 of the land. In B, each partner gets 10 cash and 1/3 of inventory and 1/3 of land. In C, each partner gets 10 cash, and these are all independent, of course. 1/3 of inventory and 1/3 of accounts receivable. So I'll put A/R. Don't want to confuse amount realized, right? Sometimes I use AR for that. And finally, in D, A gets 45 cash. B and C both receive the same thing. They each get 1/2 of the land. Okay, so we got everything here. All right. So let's go through this. So we're told in the problem, so this is what the chart looks like. And whether you're doing liquidating or non-liquidating, this is what it looks like at the top part. So you want to have your starting outside basis at the top, right? You want to have each partner or whatever partner is getting the distribution. You then want to put tier 1, and tier 1 next to it is always going to be cash. That's the only thing that goes to tier 1. Then you want to do a subtotal for the basis. Now, if the subtotal is negative, then you have to do a gain because you can't have a negative basis. It's our good old friend, that tax theme, you can't have negative basis. So if the subtotal after the cash is negative, then we have to create gain for the same amount. It equals the same amount of gain. And we'll see an example of that. Don't worry, we'll get to it. Below the gain, we then see a subtotal before we get to tier 2. Then tier 2, we're going to have the ordinary income assets. Now in this problem, again, we're looking at, I said ordinary income, my apologies, ordinary income or loss. So in this problem, we're looking at the 4 assets the partnership has, right? Partnership has cash, Cash never is going to have gain or loss because face value and basis always equal. Inventory and accounts receivable, if the partnership was to sell either of these assets, either of them would create ordinary income, ordinary loss. So they are both considered tier 2. I'll put a little 2 next to them. Right? The cash is tier 2 or tier 1, inventory and accounts receivable tier 2, and then the land held for investment is tier 3 because it's considered a capital asset. So tier 2, I leave a blank there because when you create this table, right, it could change depending on the problem. So I leave a blank there, and the reason why I left the blank was specifically because in certain problems you might have accounts receivable, you might have inventory, you might not have anything. So we leave it blank because it might not apply. Then we put a subtotal, and then we go tier 3. The only tier 3 asset in this problem is land, but it's everything else. Now finally, and this is where, so what you see here is what you should start out with a chart. The next question when you're filling out your chart before you're going into the problem and going through the mechanics, applying our tier 1, 2, and 3 rules that we had in on our slide, you ask, is this liquidating or is it non-liquidating? Because remember, that makes a big difference. Because if it's non-liquidating, we're going to have a basis to allocate to. So in this fact pattern, there's nothing that says that a partner is completely liquidating their interest in the facts given or in the distribution information given. That's how you would know. It would say complete liquidation. You'll see in problem 3 that an example where it says complete liquidation, you can see the language. But that's how you have to know. If it doesn't say that, then we assume it's non-liquidating. So here it's non-liquidating. So that means at the very bottom, we're going to allocate to the adjusted basis of the partnership interest whatever's left. Even if it's 0, we still have to put a basis there. Because going forward, this makes a big difference to the partner. Because if the partner, a year later, leaves the partnership, gets a distribution, or sells, that's the basis that we use. Now, one other thing I want to note. This is very important. There's no liabilities in this problem. If there were liabilities, and we'll see this in problem 3, that can affect constructive cash received or constructive cash paid. So keep that in mind. That's very, very important. You'll see that in another problem, but there's no liabilities here, and that makes it a lot easier for us. All right, so now we have everything in our chart needed. We're going to go through and start with the mechanics. So our first line is the starting outside adjusted basis, and that's the same for all 4 situations. We're told in the problem, respectively, it's 40, 30, 20, right? So 40 for A, 30 for B, and 20 for C, respectively. So we can actually fill out all 4 situations 40, 30, 20, like that. The first column, by the way, I gave us more room because, there might be a little bit more stuff I might write and whatnot to show, but it follows along for everything else. So we can put that all along this row, 40, 30, 20. It's very important you get this right because this obviously is going to change if you it's going to make big mistakes if you don't get this right. So we want to make sure that we write that all at once. So we got that line. Okay, so now let's go through situation A first. So tier 1 cash. So you ask, are any of the partners getting cash? And again, yes. Each partner receives $20 cash. So what we do is we put a 20 here. Now, you all know that, again, the basis of cash is the face value. But what this chart does is it's telling us, hey, the adjusted basis each partner takes in this asset on this line is $20. Now, what we do is we subtract. This is a subtraction line. Yes, it's the basis of the cash, but it's a subtraction. So we subtract, right? We get a subtotal for A of 20, subtotal for B of 10, and subtotal of C for C of 0. Now, look at the next row. If negative, we have to have gain because you can't have negative basis. Are any of them negative up to this point? And the answer is no. So that means that there's no gain. Now, if we did have negative, we'd have gain with respect to that partner up to the amount of negative to make it 0. So then we subtotal. And by the way, this actually is a positive. We actually add this line. This is the only line that we add. Everything else is going to be subtracted. So we add because gain obviously increases the basis up, as you know from partnership tax. And we get the same bases, 20, 10, and 0 above. Now we go tier 2. In A, are we receiving any tier 2 assets, right? Remember in our list, inventory and accounts receivable, and we're not. We get cash and land. Therefore, we go to tier 3. We bring down our subtotal. So our subtotal for A is 20. Subtotal for B is 10. Subtotal for C is 0. So we now go down to tier 3. Do we receive, or do any partners receive a tier 3 asset? And the answer is yes. Remember, tier 3 is everything else. They receive 1/3 of the land. Now remember, on our slide, the waterfall rules, we call them because you go through the tiers, it says that if it's a non-liquidating distribution and you get to tier 3, you will carry out the lesser of rule with respect to tier 3 assets. So we have the land as a tier 3 asset, because they're each receiving a portion of land. They're each receiving 1/3 of the land. So what we're going to do is, the rule is the lesser of the partnership's inside basis, right? The inside basis is 30, okay? These are the inside basis of the partnership, okay? So inside basis, 30. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you got to be really careful, because I'll put a little 1 here. I'll put an A, calculation A. We have to take 30 times 1/3. So 30 is the inside basis, but each of them receive 1/3. So actually, with respect to each partner, it's 10. It's a 10 inside basis. So the rule is the lesser of the 10 inside basis the partnership has for each 1/3 ownership, or the subtotal directly above the tier 3 assets, which A, 20, B, 10, C, 0. So we do the lesser of 10 and 20 for A, so that's of course 10. We do the lesser of 10 and 10 for B, which same, so it's 10. We do the lesser of 0 and 10 for C, and that's 0. So then what we do is, this is a subtraction, and I'll bring A's to a little bit over. That's why, again, I gave some room. So A actually goes here, is 10. B is 0, and C is 0. So this is actually the adjusted basis that A takes. So A takes a basis of 10 in the 1/3 interest in the land. B takes a basis of 10 in the 1/3 interest in the land. C takes a basis of 0. And then this is their adjusted basis in their partnership interest going forward. So the only one that has a basis in the partnership interest is A, because B and C both have 0. So from this problem, again, we're answering 2 questions. Is there any gain or loss to any partner? Because remember, we know in a simple distribution, partnership has no gain or loss. So for a partner, if there's gain, it will be here. This is where the gain is. Now, because all situations A, B, C, and D are non-liquidating, you'll never have a loss. That can only happen in a liquidating distribution, as our slide explains. So that's the only thing we can have is gain, not loss, for a non-liquidating distribution. If it's liquidating, though, we'll see that in problem 3, and I'll show you some examples of where we have loss. The other thing this answers is it gives us the basis of each asset received by the partners. So remember, the partners received $20 of cash and 1/3 land. Of course, the basis of the cash is 20 to each partner, and the 1/3 land is answered here, right? This gives us the adjusted basis, 10, 10, and 0. But remember, since it's a non-liquidating distribution, we also have the adjusted basis in the interest left over, which is 10, 0, and 0 respectively. So now that we've gone through all that, let's go through situation B, C, and D together. You apply all that same rationale the same way, but now you see how the mechanics work. So in B, each partner receives $10 of cash, 1/3 inventory, and 1/3 of land. So let's go through this. Right, we got 10, 10, and 10. We subtract, we get the subtotal. So that's going to be 30, 20, and 10. None of those are negative, so there's no gain. Right? So we bring those down. So 20 right there. Okay, and now we go to tier 2. Are there any tier 2 assets? Yes. In situation B. Okay, let's just make sure I have this right. I don't want to get the wrong thing. Yes, situation B, again, it's 1/3 of the inventory. Didn't want to be the 1/3 of accounts receivable, because that make a huge difference. So we've got 1/3 of inventory and 1/3 of land. So for tier 2, we're going to go ahead and put inventory down. So we have inventory. Now again, it's the lesser of rule, right? From our rules, it's the lesser of the inside basis and the outside basis up to this point. So we look at the inside basis that the partnership has the inventory. That's 60. So I'm going to put a little calculation there. B, we're going to do B, which is 60 times 1/3. So that equals 20. So the rule is going to be the lesser of 20 or the subtotal before tier 2, which is 30, 20, 10 respectively. So the lesser of 30 and 20 is 20. The lesser of 20 and 20 is the same, so it's 20. The lesser of 10 and 20 is 10. And then we subtract. And this is the adjusted basis of the inventory that each partner receives. And then we bring down the subtotal. So subtotal is going to be 10, 0, and 0. And now each partner has 1/3 of the land. Okay, 1/3 of land. And that's the same calculation we had in calculation A. So it's going to be the lesser of 10 and 10, which is 10, the same. It's going to be the lesser of 0 and 10, which is 0 and 0. Anytime you have 0 and you have the lesser of rule, of course 0 is going to be the less, because you're not going to have negatives going on here. So when you bring down our basis, and guess what? Everybody has a 0 basis in their partnership interest. So no gain in this situation, and we've got our respective bases right here, here, and here with respect to the assets. So now let's go on to C. So in C, $10 of cash, 1/3 inventory, 1/3 of accounts receivable. So because B and C are the same with respect to tier 1, right, I'm just going to put a B here, same as B. I'm going to go right down to the subtotal and just bring that, right? We know they're getting $10 of cash. That's the same basis. So we bring down the 30, 20, and 10 just like that. Okay, so now we have inventory and we have accounts receivable. Now, if we had an issue where we didn't have enough inside basis to cover both assets, that would be another story, but this is a simple discussion. What you're going to see is that the accounts receivable, which I'm going to label calculation C, the inside basis of that, right, which is 0, well, 0 times 1/3 is 0, so accounts receivable is actually pretty easy. We're just going to do 0, 0, and 0, because the lesser of 0 and a positive number is going to be 0, right? So accounts receivable is going to get 0 allocation because, again, the lesser of rule limiting the inside basis and the outside basis. For the inventory, it's actually going to be, just like we saw before, it's going to be the lesser of, right? We had our B calculation above, so it's going to be the lesser of 20 inside basis, or A's 30 basis, so 20, lesser of 20 inside basis, right? Because we're taking 1/3 of 60, or B's inside basis or outside basis of 20, and then C is lesser of 10 or 20, so that's 10. We subtract those, right? And we bring those numbers down, and we get, and this time actually we're going to bring everything down to the partnership interest because there's no tier 3 assets, which is completely fine, and we can allocate it all to that. So in this situation, right, because we subtract these numbers, we're going to have 10, 0, and 0. So right there, in situation C, A ends up with a $10 basis, B 0, and C 0 in the partnership interest. And we have our adjusted bases in each asset, right? The inventory and the accounts receivable and the outside basis. So last one, situation D. So in situation D, a little bit different. Not each partner is receiving the same thing. But again, in all these situations, all simple distributions, not complex. Because again, there's no change with respect to the proportionality of the hot assets. All right. So A receives 45 cash, B and C receive 1/2 land. So no tier 2 assets in this problem. And again, we're breaking up what people are receiving. So we go to tier 1. So the only person that receives cash is A, and A receives 45 cash. Guess what that does? Uh-oh, we've got -5. So if there's a -5, it says, if negative, right, the line above, we have gain equal to the amount. And the reason why we have that is because you can't have negative basis. That's a principle that many know in tax. That is, you cannot have a negative basis with respect to your partnership interest, just from a distribution, I should say. It's possible to have negative basis, but the general tax theme is you don't want to have that. So there's actually cases out there. There's a Parachi case in the corporate tax area where you can't have negative basis with respect to your stock. With partnerships, it's possible to have negative basis if you have loss allocated and all that stuff. However, you're limited to your basis, so you actually might not actually go negative in that sense. All right, so we give A a $5 gain, and that's important to understand. A has capital gain of $5. And if A holds the partnership interest for more than a year, it's long-term capital gain. A year or less, short-term capital gain. Because this is a simple distribution, we can characterize that as capital gain. We don't have to do the complex and then break out the hot assets and the hypothetical approach and all that stuff. So no gain to B and C because they're not negative. So look at this. A has 0 basis at this time in the subtotal. B and C have 30 and 20. So then we bring this down to the subtotal again, 0, 30, 20, and we go to tier 2. I'm sorry, tier 3, my apologies, because there's no tier 2. All right, so in tier 3, B and C receive 1/2 of the land. So now I'm going to do calculation D. In calculation D, what we're doing is we're taking the inside basis of the land, which is a 30, the partnership has, times 1/2 because B and C each receive half. So that's limited to 15. So remember, our rules, if it's a non-liquidating distribution, which we have here, tier 3, you do the lesser of rule. Lesser of the 15 inside basis to each person with respect, or to the partnership with respect to 1/2, and the partners outside. Well, A is receiving nothing, so we can just put a line there. B, it's the lesser of 15 again, right, where the inside basis is in the 1/2, or 30, so that's 15. And C, the lesser of 15 and 20, again, 15. So this is the adjusted basis in the land that each partner receives, 15 and 15. And then the adjusted basis each partner has in their partnership interest. A has 0, B has 15, and C has 5. And we have just gone through and used the chart and gone through all situations. So again, I want to reiterate, this chart is extremely powerful when you're looking at simple distributions. If you go through it, this chart, you'll never get it wrong. It always works out. And the idea, again, is you're going through the 3 tiers, right? You start with your outside basis before the distributions. You start with tier 1, go through to see if you have any cash. That then can create gain. It's the only time you can have gain to a partner in a simple distribution. Then you go to tier 2 after that, right? Whatever basis is left over. Allocate to inventory accounts receivable using the lesser of rule. Then you go to tier 3, right? All other assets. We're going to see in problem 3 that if you don't have any other tier 3 assets and you still have basis, because you can't allocate to your partnership interest, which is the last, right, for a non-liquidating, then you're going to have capital loss. But because we have a basis in the partnership interest, we can always allocate to that in this problem. So go back over this problem. Do it as many times as you need. Set up your chart. Do this to the point that you're able to answer this question without looking at the video. Because changing up numbers, whatever it is, it's all the same approach. It's all mechanical. And then once you go through that, then go on to problem 3, where we're going to talk about simple distributions again, but a liquidating, and you're going to see how things change up. So I'll see you in that video.